Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Dandavut Pranam. Welcome to Nityam Bhagat Sevaya. Today we are very happy to have the association of His Grace Shivatma Govind Prabhuji. He will be sharing Bhagavad Gita from 4th canto, 28th chapter, verses 13 and 14. The chapter is titled Puranjana Becomes Woman in His Next Life. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavut Pranam. Thank you for joining.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
Prabhu. Please start.
So I'll be skipping the opening bhajan of Srimad Bhagavatam class due to a constraint of time. Forgive me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirat Nashtapraya Shubhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's discussion from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4, Chapter 28 and 13 and 14 of the 20th chapter. Yavano parodhayatano Vristyam kalakanyaya Puryam prajvara samsrishta puraphalo anvata pratyatha. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The city's superintendent of police, the serpent, saw that the citizens were being attacked by Kalakanya, and he became very aggrieved to see his own residence set ablaze after being attacked by the Yavanas. So purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The living entity is covered by two different types of bodies, the gross body and a subtle body. At death, we can see that the gross body is finished, but actually the living entity is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. The so-called scientists of the modern age cannot see how the subtle body is working in carrying the soul from one body to another. This subtle body has been figuratively described as a serpent or the city's police superintendent. When there is fire everywhere, the police superintendent cannot escape either. When there is security and an absence of fire in the city, the police superintendent can impose his authority upon the citizens. But when there is an all-out attack on the city, he is rendered useless. As the life air was ready to leave the gross body, the subtle body also began to experience pain. I will read out this next shloka also. Na shikesu avitum tatra puru krochu kuroru vepathu ghantum aichat tato vriksha kotarad iva sanalat. As a serpent living within the cavity of a tree wishes to leave when there is a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. Purport: it becomes very difficult for snakes to leave a forest when there is a fire. Other animals may flee due to their long legs, but serpents, only being able to crawl, are generally burnt in the fire. At the last stage, the limbs of the body are not as much affected as the live air. Hey Krishna, Karuna, Sundhi, Nabandhu, Jagatpati, Gopisha, Gaurangi, Radhe Vrinda, Vanishwari, Virushabhan, Sutiri, In the purport first of the shloka text, we can see the two types of bodies are mentioned. One is the gross body and another one is subtle body. From Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, we can understand earth, water, fire, air, ether. That is gross body and subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego. All together, these 8 constitute separated material energies of the Lord. All 8 are still metal energies. When gross body fails, subtle body will be useless. A person exists in ethereal or a ghostly body if he has only subtle body. What's wrong with this ghost body? We can see from the Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, 4 categories of worshippers explained. So to have only subtle body means ghostly life. So by worshipping such kind of deities, they can reach to that place. But who wants such life? Well, some foolish, unintelligent people wishes such life. They get it by worshipping such people as per the Bhagavad Gita text from chapter 9. So here in present Srimad Bhagavatam text, Puranjana's body is finished. He's going to change his body. Many people think once this body is over, life is finished. That's a wrong philosophy. We can see from many references, Bhagavad Gita references, Bhagavatam references, where soul cannot be destroyed because soul is part and parcel of the God. So how it can be over? How it can be in existence? So this means the living entity is nothing but of God. Of course, he is God, but a minute God, minute in quantity, but not in quantity. So no dying. God will not die, so nobody will die. No soul will die. We are not this metal body. This was happened in case of in Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami was referring, he refers to inspire that the idea I will die is simply the mentality of animals. So just thinking I'm going to die, I will die, itself is a mentality of animal, because the soul does not undergo the bodily phases of previous non-existence, birth, existence, and death. So when the body's subtle mental covering is destroyed by transcendental knowledge, the soul within the body again exhibits his original identity. So the knowledge, transcendental knowledge, can give away the thought of I will die. There are like this many references from Bhagavatam also and Bhagavad Gita also, and extensively Krishna discusses about this subtle body and gross body in the second chapter, and he refers many times in the 15th chapter also, how the next body is based on the subtle, carries the life air and gives another gross body. So even in the 15th chapter, we can see the living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Here, for Purunjana is also going through the same thing, but is not able to think anything other than himself. Thinking at this moment about the Lord is very important. From Bhagavad Gita we can understand, but in his case it was not possible, as his mind is acting on the principle of hate, love, and fear. In Bhagavad Gita 8th chapter, it mentions whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering Krishna alone can attain his nature. So there is no doubt about this. And even the next text, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So many references, so many confirmations and evidences we can see at the time of leaving this body. The consciousness is so much important that decides the next gross body. And even in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 9th chapter, if out of love, hate, or fear, an embodied soul fixes his mind with intelligence and complete concentration upon a particular bodily form, he will certainly attain the form that he is meditating upon. So whatever a person meditates at the time of death, leaving this body, definitely is going to attain that form. So we can see in the further also, this is almost the Puranjana's leaving the body and takes another body. And what kind of form he takes is deciding now in these two shlokas. What was his consciousness? So that could be a positive thinking, that could be a negative thinking, whatever it could be, that is the form he's going to get next. I can give a few examples throughout the life. Whatever we think, at the end, same thing will come. That is a abhyasa. The abhyasa will give the result at the time of the leaving this body. That's an examination. So the example, who was thinking the Lord in equanimity throughout his life, like Shishupala, and one who was thinking Lord in devotion always, the residents of Dwarka, and who was thinking of the Lord in fear, Kamsa, and those who are thinking about the Lord in lust, Gopis. So thinking of the Lord in any way is fortunate. But in our today's case, Puranjana is not able to think anything other than himself. If no transformation from this state to the Lord, thinking of the Lord, then it is useless. It will be difficult also, thinking about the Lord at that time. Because he was very much attracted and attached to his family and wife. One more example we can think about the Ajamila's life. Remembering and calling somebody for help. At the time of his leaving his body, that has helped him a lot. But in our cases, in our daily life, thinking about the Lord, sometimes it will be only on weekends, Sunday Bhagavatam class, or some Saturday classes, or maybe that also sometimes we miss. But what about if I die in the weekdays, what I'm going to think? Thinking of the boss, thinking of our work, family. So we are what we are meditating upon. Determination to go back is important. So we see here, under the attack of forces of Yavanas and Kalakanya, the superintendent of police as a serpent is extensively aggrieved. The serpent here represents the life air of the subtle body. We see that when there is a trouble on the gross body, or there is some form of attack, the subtle body also suffers. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord explains there are two kinds of bodies, which we all know, gross body and subtle body. Both of them are external coverings for his soul. The subtle body is like the inner clothing, and a gross body is like the outer clothing. We may wear a shirt on top of it. We may wear a coat. Coat is like a gross body, and a shirt is like a subtle body. Ultimately, both are material. Whether gross or subtle, at the time of death, this gross body is destroyed, and subtle body carries the soul along with life air to the next body. This happens under the divine supervision of Lord seated in everybody's heart. Krishna explains again in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, subtle body carries the conceptions of life from one body to next body, just as the air carries aroma from one place to another place. When we are standing away from a nearby flower garden, and if there is a breeze, since breeze carries the aroma of the flower garden, we will be experiencing it as though we are in the same garden, though we are away from the garden. So, in other words, whatever mentality and consciousness developed in this life, our subtle body will carry to the next life and gradually gives up one body and forms the next body. The gross body is formed according to the shape of the subtle body, just like a blouse takes on to the shape of the hand which wears it. So the process of transmigration from one body to another body also takes place as a caterpillar track moves from one leaf to another leaf. It is also like the process when we walk, lifting one foot and putting another foot, lifting another foot and putting on another foot, and so on. Both the processes takes place simultaneously. Even as one is about to die, one is already preparing the next body. It doesn't mean that gross body is already physically present, that our next body, but because of the actions and consciousness of life, the subtle body is already assumed a kind of shape that will attract certain kinds of parents or father and mother of certain species. And this way, moving from one body to another, the living entity obtains certain kind of weird nose, tongue, eyes, and so on. According to the nature of the gross body, the living entity will start enjoying the sense objects around them. If he gets the body of a dog, he will start enjoying a bone. If he gets a body of a hog, he will start enjoying stool food. We have a very good reference, the story of Indra, who became a hog in the chambers, dustbin chambers, everything. So we know all those story. So the hog, the Indra, as though in the hog's body, was enjoying, and it was referring, you are not enjoying, you are useless. I'm enjoying it. Don't disturb me. So the original nature of the soul is actually pure consciousness, just like water. When water falls from the cloud, it will be pure. But when the water falls on the ground, it becomes muddy. Similarly, the soul, which is originally pure, falls into the contact of this material world, and with the three modes of material nature, it becomes covered by the illusory energy. And because the illusory energy develops a kind of material mentality in the consciousness of a living being, and because of this, various kinds of sense desires will be formed, and within the mind of and the subtle body of living entity, it is affected. The more living beings exposed to various forms of worldly enjoyments in the life, the impressions becomes much stronger, because the mind can be compared to something like a lake. Every experience that a person has, everything that a person sees, hears, feels, etc., forms an impression on the lake of the mind. Depending on the intensity of experience, some impressions will be very strong and some will not be strong. Those impressions that are very strong, they form the predominant consciousness of that particular living being. And the other impressions that are not so strong will be there, but they will be relatively in the background. In this way, by the contact with the three modes of material nature, by living life in this material world, a man accumulates various categories of impressions upon the mind. And it is the strong impression which makes our predominant consciousness. And this is predominant mentality that ultimately determines our next life. So we can see that we experience that which are imprinted on the subtle body are really very crucial. And therefore, the subtle body moves on to the next life, leaving behind the gross body, and impressions remains in the subtle body. And therefore, impressions may come from time to time onto the surface, and many times they manifest to the medium of the gross body. We have seen many people, how they behave sometimes weirdly. That's all because of previous impressions on the subtle body and the mind, which is coming out to the surface, depending on the atmosphere in which that will come out. There is a famous example about this, like where a child was remembering her previous life, but that was come to the surface, and it was understood by the parents when the kid started speaking, that she was started speaking. So people could understand that she was remembering her previous life. But before she started speaking also, she was experiencing, she was showing her behavior, the impact of her previous life. How? Because when in the villages, we all know they go to fetch the water from the well. And this child was carried by the mother. This was a usual practice in the village where they take the children to teach them. But she was a small baby. Though she was holding, mother was holding her, she was crying. She was uncomfortable going near the well. But other children were all fine. They were all with the mothers. But this particular child was a little bit uncomfortable. She was not ready to come near the well. She was trying to cry. But when she started to speak, when she learned to speak, she started speaking about her previous life. And she was referring that I am not this. I am the one who was that. And she was referring the names of the parents, names of the name of the village, and why she was uncomfortable going near the well. She explained why. In her previous life, somebody pushed her in the water, in the well, and that's how she was left her body. And this impact, that impression on her mind was so strong that even in this life, she remembers that. And the same agony, turbulence, she feels when she sees the well. In fact, this case was also proved true after the parents and their the child's relatives started investigating why this is happening to her, and they came to know that in fact this kind of village and this kind of parents and with that same name and that well was there, and in fact this was the truth that that girl was telling how she left her body. So somebody has pushed her in the well. So that's what everything was proven, and that impact in our life on the mind is still there. So similarly, we find that many people have very irrational fears and rather irrational likes and dislikes about certain places and things. And it does not explain from common sense. One cannot understand why this is so. But in many cases, we can understand that this is possible because of a very strong impression, negative or positive, from previous life. In fact, there are many modern psychologists who appreciate this ancient Vedic concept, and they practice this in their profession. I have seen some of the professionals, how they treat the patients suffering from this kind of turbulence. So they place the patient under the hypnosis and take the patient back further and further and further in the time, and they write till their patient's time of birth in mentally. Because you see, even we may not remember right now, but all impressions are there in the subconsciousness mind, like a lake. Everything is recorded there, even if not in the consciousness. And then psychologists take the patient even back before the birth in the mother's womb, and even before that, including his previous life. Under hypnosis, all the impressions that are in the subconsciousness level, that were there earlier, strong impressions will be there. They are made to come out to the surface, and the patient is able to understand and speak out about them under the hypnotic condition. Then the psychologists are able to treat the patient and understand what kind of trauma that a patient is experiencing in previous life, and the impact is there in the current life, and is such experience that determines the irrational behavior of a person in the current life. So this is empirical evidence for the fact that there is something called a subtle body, and still our scientists refuse to accept. So bad about it. Actually, you look at very seriously, science actually knows nothing. It appears that they know so much because they have rockets, spaceships, computers, and whatnot. But the fact is that even on the material realm, they have been able to understand only a small fraction. They are not even able to understand the gross metal energy to a fraction of an extent. What to speak of the subtle metal energy, like the body, subtle body, gross body, and what to further speak of the soul? What further to speak of Krishna, and what to speak of the spiritual world? Far, far away from them, actually. But because of giving such examples, we can make people understand logically that there must be a subtle body, and there must be a previous life, and there must be a soul which moves from one life to another life. And there is another interesting kind of experience that happened in India, like a scientist who was trying to know about the memories of the past life in some children. So several cases are there like this, but one interesting case which I try to refer here, where the people, they remember their previous lives. In this case, when there happens a violent death, like this happened in the previous example, so they remember the impact is so much on the mind that in that current life also that will be surfaced. So in one case, one person was a farmer in his previous life, and in his previous life as a farmer, he had a fight with the villagers, and in that fight, villagers hit him with a sickle on his head, and that's how he left his body. And he had a very strong scar on his forehead. And in this life also, he had a scar. The small boy had a scar, and people were wondering how this is possible on a newly born baby, how this scar is there. So from this scientist, this psychologist, they came to know that this was because of the impression, the impact of that hitting on his forehead by the sickle by the villagers, that at the time of his leaving his body, that even the gross body has that impact in this life. So this was the case. So just imagine how it could be on our spiritual platform, understanding all these things, the subtle body, the subtle impact on the mind, and the gross body in the further. All these scientists cannot be explained. This phenomena they cannot understand. But from the understanding of subtle body, we can understand why this kind of things will happen and why this takes place. When something very violent happens on the gross body, because of its powerful impact, and the impact is so strong, felt on the subtle body also, just to like because of these strong impressions formed on the subtle body, this is transformed into the next gross body also. So just like if somebody injures, sometimes if somebody injures me and there is the blood and my shirt is got also blood, and I change the shirt without cleaning my blood on my body, even in a new shirt which I wore, that also will get blood on that. But if I had cleaned, that will not be there. But the blood has come because of the strong impact on my body. If it is a lighter, it wouldn't have shown that blood. So even if we keep changing the body, the blood, like a shirt, we change the bodies, the impact that will surfaces also. Similarly, strong impressions in the subtle body also manifest in the next gross body, but lighter impressions may not manifest to that degree. So we can see how the connection between the subtle body and the gross body is so important. It is a very, very subtle process, but under the supervision of the Lord. So it's a very interesting process, how it has been transmigrated. The life air is carried, the impact from the mind by the subtle body to another gross body. There is another interesting story. It is not a concocted story. It is a real life story which happened in Punjab. Maybe this is a few centuries ago. There was a king in Punjab, Ranjit Singh, and that time there was a person who was asked to come to his court. The reason was this person, there was an incident in that garden of this palace. The cow was going and eating the grass there or some plants which was there in the garden. And since the garden was protected with the grill of bars of steel bars, iron rods, the cow had put its head inside between the two bars and eating. After eating, the mother cow wanted to take out its head out, but it was stuck between those two bars. Somehow it was through, but it was not able to come out, and its horns were stuck there. So it was struggling so much. There, the localite, the villagers started gathering, and they were watching this, and they were trying to rescue the cow. So in this process, one villager said, let us cut this one bar, that steel bar, so that cow heads can come out. And another villager was telling, why not we remove the gate itself so that the cow can be rescued? So like this kind of different thoughts were shared, but one important person came, whom the king was called to the court. He was telling, why all this difficulty? I have a very simple solution. Let's not cut the steel bar or removing the gate. Let's chop off the horns of the cow itself so that it can come out easily. But anyway, the villagers didn't agree for this. They cut open the rod of the gate and the cow was rescued. But this discussion, the incident, that came to the note of the king Ranjit, and the king asked this person to come to the court. That was the reason. This is a background. Why that king was arranged his visit was he came there and he was very, very frightened to come to the court, because he as per him, he has not done any sin, but still he was called for the court, and he was asked his name, and he told such and such, and he said, "Are you Hindu?" Uh, the Ranjit Singh was also Hindu, a Sikh, but he was asking that person, "Are you a Hindu?" He said, "Yes, but I don't see you are a Hindu. Call your mother. Let me see." So mother was again called, and mother was also asked what's her name, and she said, and he asked, "Are you Hindu?" "Yes." "What about your son?" She said, "Yes, Hindu." "But I don't see, there is something wrong with you people. I don't see you are a Hindu, because Hindus never think about killing a cow or chopping this kind of horns. It is not a correct thought of a Hindu. So how come this fellow has? So I think there must be something wrong with this person, this boy, this person. So give me some, there should be some reason for this. But mother was telling, no, nothing has happened, everything is fine. But with this conversation, she remembered, she said, yes, there was an incident happened when she was giving the birth to this person, this boy, this child. She happened to see a butcher through a window where she was giving the birth. And when she saw the butcher, she remembered, oh, this person is going to kill the animals. That impact was there on the gross body of this child. And that impact is there still in this life of this boy. And that's how he was thinking in that way, butchering, chopping off the horns of the cow. And she remembers and she gave this. So a moment of the impact on the mind, how that will give the outcome on the next body. Just imagine. Even I can give the reference from Bhagavatam, where how the Prahlad Maharaj took birth in the demonic family. So we all know what is the consciousness of the Hiranyakashipu was that time. So whether thoughts we have impression can such a lasting effect, whatever thoughts we have now, we are all the product of impressions of our subtle body from the past. It is not possible for us to have any thought on any subject which we have not experienced in the past. Even if a random wild thought to our mind, we have already experienced it actually, either in this life or in the past or in the previous life, either in the human form or in any animal life. All these impressions remain in life or some other form of life, and all these impressions will be there, accumulated, and at the proper time they come out to the surface according to what kind of association we will have. There would be impression on that kind of on the subtle body and the mind. The thoughts will be keep coming. We can see the example of a drunkard who was going regularly, and he has given up after some time, maybe after a few years. Still, the thought will be coming to his mind even after he stopped going to the liquor shop, that how he was experiencing, the impact is there still, and he still remembers that. But his free will try to control it, will overcome from that, and that free will has to be used. Because of the strong association of the previous time, his thoughts and on his mind are still, that impact is there, and that keeps coming surface out whenever he sees a liquor shop or a friend or who drinks. So this kind of impression on the in the current life also will be there, and these impressions come to the surface and produce thoughts and desires. And the same principle works on spiritual platform also. If we associate more and more with the devotees and the spiritual platform, Krishna conscious activities, then this will become strong impressions on the mind. And because of, if we are unable to make our spiritual life successful in this life, still we will carry forward the this flavor to the next life also, because impression are very powerful. What we can say, abhyasa, purva abhyasa. When a purva abhyasa or a practice in the previous life, one becomes attracted to the spiritual activities or yogic practices, and for some reason he couldn't succeed in that previous life. The next life, helplessly, Krishna refers this point as helplessly, one becomes attracted to the devotional life in the next life also. We can see many children or few children will be immediately after they grow a little bit, they were attracted to the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita or shlokas of so many things, and association, they help their parents in devotional life, doing the arti, so many things. Simply that's because of the previous life's impression is still carry forwarded in the devotional life. So somehow we have that children are felt the urge to go to the devotional life without any difficulty. For some people, it is required the abhyasa in this current life. Anyway, so the logical explanation of this, why we does not consider this kind of experiences, or we consider this kind of experiences, like another child is attracted to father and one child is attracted to the mother, or like that. So we can see that our association is a most important and in the life, and according to the kind of association, we have the will we create that impression on our subtle body, and according to the impressions in the subtle body, we will form the gross body, and this subtle body determines everything. Of course, we also have the free will, but because of strong association, the desire that one born out of association, sometimes our free will is overpowers sometimes. So because of our past experience in karmic life, certain impressions are formed in our subtle body, and now we desire to use our free will to obtain from all the activities and serve Krishna wholeheartedly. So although our free will is already expressed in our service to Krishna, yet the experience of the past which have formed strong impression on our mind sometimes go against it, and we may become helpless, victims of our past impressions, past life, past experiences, association. So in Bhagavad Gita also it is referred in the second chapter about this. So a very significant description in which Lord Krishna says, everything begins from contemplation. What we see, hear, smell, naturally that will depend on what you are and when you are associated with So depending on what you hear and see and smell, you will start developing some attachment towards them. The attachment becomes strong and becomes transformed into kind of lust. And when the lust is not fulfilled, there is an anger. And when there is anger, one's memory is lost, and one falls down to the material pool and performs horrible activities. So just see how these impressions born out of simply observing, smelling, feeling, they become so powerful that they pull a person down to hell, and they can push up to the spiritual world also. And this is all accomplished simply by the agency of subtle body. So naturally, when a gross body is troubled, as we see in the case of serpent's body, the subtle body feels great pain and wants to leave the body itself, leave the city itself, and that is the moment of death. Therefore, it is very important for us to create the subtle or suitable impressions on the subtle body by always associating in the spiritual atmosphere. The outside environment is very, very detrimental and produces all wrong kind of impressions on the subtle body. So by trying to be in the association of devotees and by practicing the all the regulative principles that Srila Prabhupada taught us, we should create the right impression on the subtle body. And this way, we will be purifying our subtle body, and at the time, right time, it is necessary.
Sorry, I didn't get all of that. Try asking a different way.
Part of the death, time of the death, the point, then we will be able to leave even a subtle body behind, apart from the gross body that reminds us the subtle body, and it carries our impact of the devotional services or the activities to the next life, at least, if not to the spiritual world itself. Such a beautiful science we have, and so systematically it has been explained logically how we can go back to the spiritual world, and by making a nice impact on the mind in this life, by chanting the process, the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, associating. So one must always come to temple and sit in the Bhagavatam class to get maximum benefit. One must awake for such things, even if sometimes in the class we go to sleep, but doesn't matter. We can try awakening us. There is the spiritual vibration of the class, the words spoken there, that will go there. That should be a lighter impact on the mind, but still it is nothing wrong. But let us try to be awake. So chanting loudly Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process is very, very impactful on our lives. In the next shloka, there are some few important points which I have to mention if time permits. Is that okay, Prabhu? I can give 2-3 points more on this.
Sure, Prabhu.
How it happened to Puranjanas. So
yes, Prabhu, please.
Thank you, Prabhu. So, the city of gates, so we see, is under the attack of the forces of the soldiers of Yavanas and Kalakanya. So the superintendent of police is now aggrieved, extremely aggrieved. The serpent here represents the life air of the subtle body. We see that when there is a trouble on the gross body, or there is some form of attack, the subtle body also suffers. So again, we can see in the references from the Bhagavad Gita about the subtle body and the gross body, how it is related. We discussed just before how it is like that. So Krishna also explains in 15th chapter that subtle body carries the conceptions of life from one body to the next body, just an air carries from aroma from one place to another. So this is very important concept, thoughts we should think, and this is a science actually, but unfortunately the science will not get into such things, and the understanding will not be there. So according to the shape of the subtle body, the gross body is also formed. So this was, in this case of Puranjana, what has happened is the snake as a serpent wants to leave the city, but he stopped, and being thus baffled in the attempt to go out of this body or out of the city, it was loudly crying, screaming. So there will be illness, there will be diseases at the time of leaving this body. And from both sides, from internally, the life air wants to go out, but the gross body with the disease and a lot of other turbulences is not able to leave. So both sides, it has been pressurized, and soul will try to cry, scream. And this has to be gone through. With the greater suffering actually will be there. Neither leave there or go away. Both are not possible. This is pitiable condition of death. We're all in the one day has to be faced this kind of situation. So and also need not to worry about it, as this we already faced in our previous millions of lives. So but now in this life, at least we can avail the form of the benefits of the human form and face this issue without any difficulties. Because this ultimate moment, death is certain for everyone. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I am all devouring death, and I am the generator of all the things yet to be, isn't it, from Bhagavad Gita? So this for all devotees or for non-devotees. The non-devotees generally do not believe in Krishna or God, but still at death they will see Krishna in the form of death. So it is said that for non-devotees, Krishna comes as death, and but for the devotees, death comes as Krishna. So this is very significant point. Why is this so? Because a non-devotee does not believe in Krishna, but Krishna says, all right, I will show you myself to you in this terrible form of death. And as a punishment for all your sinful activities, I shall take away everything from you and subject you to great suffering. But for the devotees, Krishna is very merciful and kind, and he tells the devotee that you are leading such a pure life. You have been working so hard, undergoing austerities and sufferings simply to serve me. Therefore, for you, death will be simply a gateway to the abode of the Lord. So we have heard in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, the few devotees, how he steps on the death personified, and steps out and he goes out from this material world. So, but the devotees, he can boldly put his foot on the head of the death personified and step over to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha. This is the power of devotional service. But nevertheless, whether the devotee or non-devotee, death will come. So one must prepare for it and not become anxious about expecting the death. When Devaki was being married to the Vasudeva, and her brother Kamsa was taking her to the home on his chariot, there was a voice coming from there reminding him about he is taking a death in his chariot, because eighth son of his sister Devaki will be the cause for his death. So Kamsa became so much disturbed, and he held the hair of the Devaki and pulled out the sword to chop her head. At that time, Vasudeva pleaded him and gave some knowledge to him about how he is a hero, and a brave man should not worry about the difficulties faced of the death. Why you should be think about the difficulties of the death? Why you should think about the death so much aggressively? So he was mentioning, my dear brave man, hero, please know that death is born along with its body. Those who have taken birth, death is also comes with, is but only a matter of time. It is not there, but once the time comes, death will come. So once birth is there, death is there in certain. So he will not even after death, the death will not leave for the next life also, because next life again one more birth, and as per the his past activities, another life will be there, again the death will be there. So death also will come along with the until the soul is in metal world. So that is, so why we should Kamsa should think about so seriously about this life, and he somehow convinces him and intelligently, and he the story of that. So we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, 6th canto, there is a story of demon Vritrasura, how energetic he was. Energetically he was fighting with the demigods headed by the Indra. In his previous life, actually he was king of Chitrakuta, and he was a very great devotee. But because of the curse by Mother Parvati, he has to take a demonic birth in his next life, and that's how he was like that. When in the battlefield, he was so furious and was so strong, the soldiers of the demigods were frightened. They were fallen down, hearing the loud roar of the Vritrasura. But Vritrasura was asking those demigods, you come back, take the courage, don't just give up. So he was encouraging them to fight, and he was giving the knowledge of the how a person should lead body gloriously, at least on the battlefield, or at least as a devotee. So he was mentioning, remembering the Supreme Person of Godhead at the time of death is important. or at least you die on the battlefield. So he was encouraging the demigods to fight against him. So during this fight, even Indra was also defeated, and even his Airavata elephant was also been smashed. So Vritrasura, who was also injured, of course, because this was predicted by his worshipable deity Sankarshana, that the demigods are going to win this battle. Knowingly this also, when there was a fight between Vritrasura, the Indra also was defeated and he was almost given up. But Vritrasura gives the knowledge that you should not give up. Anyway, this was already been destined and it's already been predicted by your worshipable deity Sankarshana. Go ahead, take fight, and of course in the battle Indra actually wins, and at the end Indra kills the Vritrasura and Indra was succeeded. The Acharya says this death of Vritrasura is actually not a death. In fact, because his consciousness was good, he was a devotee in his previous life that was carried forward in the current life, and he remembered and he gave the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita at that time to his enemies also, and he left his body in that consciousness. He went to Vaikuntha. He went to the spiritual life and he went to the eternal life actually. So that is not a death. Whereas Indra, he won the battle and he stayed back in this material world and he started living for the death in the material world. So Acharya refers, actually the death of the Vritrasura is actually the life, eternal life, and winning of the battle by the Indra is actually death itself. So in the midst of the opulences and enjoyment in this material world, the division of the mind will be there, and that's how the birth and death cycle again catches up. So similar point is also mentioned in Mukundamala Stotra by King Kulashekara. He refers, this body is just a lump of misery, diseases and so many things, and people simply take the medicine to cure and again suffer. So rather taking the medicines, take the medicine of the tonic of the Krishna Nama. So at least the cycle of birth and death can be escaped from this. Not like in the city of this person, Prunjana Goragara, that the time of death, what he is thinking about his family, about his sufferings, the turbulence of the body, gross body. So at least the Nama achievement, the names of the Lord is taken at the time of death, at least that will be successful. That is a tonic of Krishna. So even Kunti Devi was referring or praying that simply by hearing and chanting of about the Lord, and one can very quickly have the darshan of the lotus feet of the Lord. So that is another reference. So at the time of death, thinking about the Lord is very impactful, and because this best experience in this life will give the impact for the next life that will be carried on. So even the Srimad Bhagavatam that started, the Parikshit Maharaj, I was referring that he was hesitant about his death. So that time, Shukadeva Goswami and others, there were discussion happening. He was telling, don't think about the death. Only the animal can think about, I'm going to die. You're not going to die. And was inspired. and the Bhagavatam was given. And after that, when the discussion was going on, Parikshit Maharaj was so much engrossed and so much understood. Others were thinking that the cursed snake is going to come and kill the Maharaj. But Maharaj was telling, Parikshit Maharaj was telling, don't worry about my death. Let it come. Whoever, whatever the boy has cursed, let it come and bite me. Let me give up. So you don't stop chanting or hearing or speaking about the Lord. Don't ever stop. Let it continue. So, so that was the attitude of the devotee. So similarly, we should also have that kind of attitude. Problems will come and problems will go, but we have to prepare for the biggest problem, that is death. So we must not get disturbed by our worldly problems and prevent ourselves from trying to achieve the success in solving problems, because all causes are by the cause of all causes. So because we must chant 16 rounds Hare Krishna mantra sincerely, one must practice this. We all should practice this. Hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly, sincerely. Participate in the Nama Sankirtana and temple activities. One must read Srila Prabhupada books carefully every day. One must engage in devotional service as much as possible every day and serve the devotees, taking association with them in the mood of humility and love. One must follow all the rules and regulations that are required for the devotee. For all these things, our temple is there, all the facilities are there. All which I mentioned now is all the things are available, and a new temple is coming, more services, a bigger temple, bigger atmosphere, bigger association, bigger Sankirtan, more services. We all should get into that and do whatever is necessary as a devotee. If we practice, but at the time of death, we will be able to remember Krishna and attain a perfection of life, the human life. So it is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, even if you're a great yogi or you may be following all your duties according to Varna and Ashrama perfectly, but the perfection of all these activities is Ante Narayana Smriti. So remembering the Lord at that moment of leaving the body will be very important, and to remember that at that point, practicing in the current life is very, very important. So because the death also is referred in the Garuda Purana, it is a bite of 40,000 scorpions at a time. We are so much scared of a bite of a mosquito. How do we experience the bite of the scorpion, 40,000 scorpions at a time, at that time? That is the experience of the death. How do we remember? Only by abhyasa. So we must take the Krishna conscious process very sincerely, seriously, always chant Hare Krishna and help others and help ourselves and help me also. So all of you in association of the devotional life, expressing our gratitude to the Srila Prabhupada will give us a very good impact on our subtle body and the mind, which helps a lot. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Sorry, forgive me. I've taken a lot of time, but I couldn't stop. So if anything which has to be added or edited in my talk today, please let me know so I can correct myself.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the wonderful and the elaborate explanation on the transmigration of the soul. A few takeaway points that I could note down were like thinking of that we will die itself is an animalistic thought, and then as you mentioned, very with various examples that various impressions that we have are the reasons that the thoughts that we have continuously in this lifetime. Thank you, and also the practical points on how to get the right thoughts and have the right impressions towards the end. Devotees can unmute themselves to share any reflections or any questions if they have. Can I ask Prabhuji directly?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Very, very wonderful class, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I got so many ideas to preach the atheists, but my humble request, Prabhu, being Manda Sumanda Matis, please make the class short so that something will retain permanently in the brain, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Forgive me, Mataji. I want to give a very good impact on our mind. So probably it would have taken a long time. Please kindly forgive me.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Wonderful class, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Shivatma, Govinda, Prabhu.
Hare
Thank you very
Krishna.
much, Prabhu. Wonderful, wonderful. Initially, I thought a scientist is speaking, but it was so nicely explained. Reincarnation, everything so nicely. And finally, you connected so nicely for our devotional service. So nice, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, from what I hear, please correct me if I am wrong. That means the subtle body gets transferred when the body migrates. But what I thought is the memory will be all these things. The ego, the memory, everything will be mind, body, mind, ego. It will be lost when the body transmigrates, I heard. But when I'm hearing you are, I think...
it is not connecting.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. Actually, at the time of death, even when we see in the Puranjana's case, gross body is left, a subtle body, which I had mentioned in the beginning, mind, intelligence, and false ego will be carried. That is called as a subtle body. And that subtle body carries our impact on the mind also, because subtle body is a part of the mind. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these three will be carried throughout our material lives.
But what I heard, Prabhu, in the previous lectures, that only in certain people that will be carried. I mean, but whatever we think, that form we take. Like how Bharat Maharaj, he was thinking about the deer and he became the deer. Or like Puranjana, he was thinking about his wife and he takes the birth as a woman, that is Vidarbhi. That's what I heard. But it doesn't happen always. Maybe we might take a birth according to whatever we think. But I think that memory will not be there, no, Prabhu.
Yeah. Maybe in this current life, I may not be remembering my previous lives, mind, intelligence, and about my ego. I don't know. But doesn't mean that it is not there. It could be under the subconscious level. That's what I was mentioning, some examples about how a hypnotist will take us or a patient's mind to back to the time till where he was born, and even before that, to the previous lives. So all this is there recorded safely in our subconscious level, and that subconscious level coming out is not required. That is also a blessing by the Lord, because remembering our previous lives, that troubles us so much. I gave example of that a scary child was going near the well. She was very scared. That was the impact. So when we get the forgetfulness which Lord has given to us, that is actually required. We have forgotten. We have gone to that forgetfulness. And that is all we don't remember. Doesn't mean that the memory is not there. It will be there.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Dandot Pranam.
Right.
Okay, Guruji, we'll conclude with Vaishnav Pranams. Thank you again for your time and also for the devotees. Apologies for extending a little bit. We'll conclude with Vaishnav Pranams. Vancha kalpataru.
Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Gurudev ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.